Hi, I see folks are trickling in. We're going to start 2 minutes after the hour just to give folks a chance to settle in, fill up your water or other beverage. But to kind of get the juices flowing, we've got three questions for you. A poll should come up on your screen, so feel empowered to answer those.
Hello. Hello. Can you hear me?
Yeah, she can be heard. We can hear you.
And thanks everyone for joining. If you could remain muted through the course of the presentation, we're just waiting for folks to join, and then we'll get started. In the meantime, feel free to fill out the poll.
Yeah, folks are still steadily trickling in, so I'm gonna wait until 1:03 actually to get started.
Okay, I think we can close the poll.
Awesome. Thank you all. This is great. So yeah, we were curious which industry folks were coming from. Really curious to know the breakdown of building owners or managers versus potential third-party verification vendors. Wanted to gauge how familiar folks were with benchmarking. And then wanted to know if folks submitted their benchmarking data to Maryland Department of Environment this year. So thank you for that. Okay, so yeah, it is 1:03. I am officially going to get things started. Um, so hi everyone. I think I know a great many of you on this call. My name is Rebecca Price. I'll do a full introduction on who I am and who I work for in a second. I did just want to start with some logistics. We have a very large number of attendees on the call this afternoon, which is super exciting. So please, I ask folks to keep themselves muted to avoid disruptions. Thank you for your understanding. Um, my co-host Mary and I are going to run through our presentations first, and then we will be taking questions at the end. We hope to kind of finish up our remarks after 35-40 minutes. So we'll have plenty of time for all your burning questions. You can ask those questions in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. So just keep those flowing. So kind of quick rundown of where we're going in the next hour. This is actually not on there, but we're going to do introductions first. So in a second, I'll introduce my work with the Maryland Clean Buildings Hub. I'll pass it over to my colleague Mary, who will introduce herself and her work with the Building Innovation Hub. Yes, you heard that right. Both of your co-hosts today have Hub in their respective organizations' names. We're also going to do some kind of level setting before we dig deep into third-party verification. So, um, understanding the relationship between benchmarking and building energy performance standards in Maryland, reviewing the third-party verification requirement. We're really going to take that just straight from Maryland Department of Environment's benchmarking guide. Then we're going to get into the meat of it, reviewing and discussing resources to assist you with third-party verification, getting into some best practices, and then the floor is yours for some Q&A. And hopefully we can get all that in an hour. Next slide, and then go over one more. Awesome. Okay. So again, I know a great many of you on this call, so hello to my old friends. But for those who haven't met me yet, my name is Rebecca Price. I do go by Becky. I'm an employee with the Maryland Energy Administration, which is Maryland's state energy office. I run an initiative out of MEA, a statutorily mandated initiative, might I add, called the Maryland Clean Buildings Hub. And our mission, we really seek to empower Maryland's building owners to make well-informed energy investments in their properties by connecting them to financial, educational, and technical assistance. What that means is that we really want you to decarbonize your buildings, and we stand ready to meet you where you're at, listen to you, listen to your concerns, and connect you to any information and resources you need to get that done. And I think an important aspect of this is that if no such resource exists, we want to hear about it, and we will do what we can to create it or partner with someone to help us create it. Again, we are kind of nested in a government agency, and there's a few places you can find us. We've got some web pages on Maryland Energy Administration's website. So if you type in Maryland Clean Buildings Hub, I think our SEO is working in our favor, and our pages will come right up, and you can start your journey and toggle through the website to find financial resources, technical, etc. We also publish a monthly newsletter. It is one of the greatest honors of my job, curating this newsletter. It is so fun to connect with you all. That's kind of your one-stop shop place for updates on building decarb policies in Maryland, incentives, events, etc. So please sign up if you haven't already. And then we also have a YouTube channel where we compile relevant webinars, recordings, etc. In line with sort of our mission, we've been hearing that folks really want to discuss the third-party verification requirement of the Maryland Building Energy Performance Standards. So we thought it was high time to get a webinar together to discuss some resources so that you can kind of make sense of this new requirement coming. But before we dig into all that, I'm going to quickly throw it back over to Mary to introduce herself.
All right. Hello, everyone. I'm Mary Thomas. I'm director of the Building Innovation Hub, which is a nonprofit that focuses on supporting building stakeholders in the DC metropolitan region, really anyone in the life cycle of a building, with resources, information, and vital connections necessary to create and operate high-performance buildings. And that includes supporting buildings with benchmarking and building performance standards in both DC and Maryland. We were launched in 2020. We're a project of the Institute for Market Transformation, which is a national nonprofit. But we were launched in 2020, really initially focusing on DC, and have since expanded our support into Maryland, able to collaborate with Becky and her team. And one thing we're really excited to do is to be able to bring lessons learned from DC to Maryland as it relates to benchmarking and BEPS, which is really notable because DC has been benchmarking for over 10 years and it's nearing the end of its first BEPS cycle. So a lot of experience there and lessons learned. And I'm sure there's some folks on the call who bridge both DC and Maryland, so you yourselves may have some lessons that you can share. So some of you may have attended our Maryland benchmarking office hours last summer, and you'll hear from me to dig into more details on the third-party verification. But definitely excited to collaborate with Becky and the Maryland Clean Buildings Hub on this resource. So I'll turn it back to Becky.
Awesome. Thank you. I don't know if anyone saw that, but I'm in an office and the lights all turned off because I guess I wasn't moving enough. So, yeah, if we could just go to the next slide. Thank you. Just want to be mindful that we may all be starting from different levels of expertise and comfort. So if you're completely new to BEPS and benchmarking, maybe this is your first day on the job and your boss just told you to join this webinar. So I just wanted to quickly review what benchmarking is. So really, energy benchmarking simply means tracking and reporting a building's energy usage and the associated emissions of that energy usage. It's most often done in a free web-based tool known as Energy Star Portfolio Manager, which is managed by the Federal Environmental Protection Agency. If you know me, you know I am a huge fan of analogies, and when I'm explaining benchmarking to my friends in my personal life, I say that it's your building's annual physical, and it's like getting your building's vitals checked. And really, at its core, benchmarking is helping you understand how your building uses energy. Next slide. So tying this into Maryland's Building Energy Performance Standards, i.e. BEPS program, benchmarking is that core foundational first step in order for this program to work. It is essential in identifying the level of action that you are potentially going to need to take under this program. So I like to remind folks that benchmarking is just information, which then you need to act on. So kind of drawing on that annual physical analogy again, your blood work may tell you that you're really low on iron, but then it's up to you to go buy some iron supplements over at CVS. So reviewing your benchmarking data is going to allow you to understand where there's opportunity to improve performance, and then in years to come, you will need to act on that performance. MDE, Maryland Department of the Environment's benchmarking guide, is kind of your best resource on the requirements, the benchmarking requirements for the BEPS program. It's extremely comprehensive. It's got screenshots. I've heard some great feedback on how folks just have it up on one of their monitors, and then they're in Portfolio Manager on the other. So really encourage you to review that in its entirety as you're working through benchmarking. Next slide. This is just a timeline so we can kind of orient ourselves. This past year, so September 30th, 2025 was the first benchmarking deadline in the BEPS program. Building owners are going to have to benchmark every single year, basically until the end of time. But the emission standards kind of stop in 2040. And then we'll discuss this in a second, but third-party verification is required every 5 years, beginning in 2026 on June 1st. Next slide. Cool. So that brings us to third-party verification. Let's just make sure we're on the same page on what this is. We are drawing all of this information straight from MDE's benchmarking guide. I can't remember off the top of my head which page it is. So on June 1st, 2026, and every 5 years thereafter, like I said, MDE requires verification of the accuracy of that benchmarking data that is entered into Portfolio Manager. Who is a third-party verifier? I think that's probably our most common question. MDE says that they must have one of 4 credentials. You will see them on the screen. So professional engineer issued within the United States, licensed architect issued within the United States, certified energy manager certification, or a building energy assessment professional. Crucially, third-party verification cannot be carried out by your building's in-house staff. It has to be done by an external party. The good news is that you can use the vendor you've used for your benchmarking services to complete the third-party verification requirement. I understand that's a little more flexible than DC's requirement, which says that the firm or the vendor that does your energy benchmarking cannot be the same as the verifier. So I guess a little gift to you all. Next slide. Again, before we sort of uh, get too far down this road, I wanted to take a minute to sort of like discuss the importance of this of third-party verification. I know it may seem super onerous, but it is really intended to be a measure to help building owners. And it's also crucial to protect the integrity and effectiveness of our state's BEPS program. Um, so as most of you know, DC also has a BEPS program, and they're a few years ahead of us on implementation. So I thought I would dig into their first ever third-party verification report. Buildings were required to complete this requirement in 2024, and at the beginning of this year, DC Department of Energy and the Environment kind of sifted through that data and compiled some takeaways. So I just wanted to leave you with some of this. So one quarter, 25% of the buildings that completed the third-party verification requirement requested an update to their energy performance data based on the findings. So there are errors. Most of the errors, if not all, are probably innocent errors. But they are there. Of the over 1,000 data correction tickets that were received, over 70% were due to the size of the building being misreported. Requesting an increase to the gross floor area reported generally improves a building's energy performance, as gross floor area factors into the energy use intensity metrics and Energy Star score of a building. So on average, these buildings increase their floor area by 22%. And then 7% of requests requested a change in reported energy or water usage data. I pulled an example of what could be found during a third-party verification investigation. So we're just going to read this off the page. A multifamily property was receiving aggregate meter data from Pepco for the meters at its property, and also, as it happens, the property next door. So resolving the aggregate meter data issues increased the Energy Star rating for the property and therefore decreased the site EUI. So kind of an example of how this process could help you. Next slide. Pardon the ugly slide here. I intentionally took a screenshot of our third-party verification section on the Clean Buildings Hub's benchmarking page on our website. I just wanted folks to know that this is a living library and we will be adding to it as we become aware of more resources. And so we're kind of heading into the kind of resource section of our presentation today, and I just wanted to flag some that may help you make sense of this requirement. And then then I'll pass it over to Mary to talk about what I'm calling the crown jewel of resources. So first and foremost, I imagine that some of you have questions about the regulation itself. For example, I could foresee folks being interested in why MDE chose those 4 credentials that I named. Unfortunately, this webinar is not the forum for questions like that. Just as a friendly reminder, neither myself or Mary work for the regulator, which is MDE. That said, MDE's BEPS team hosts several working groups to solicit stakeholder feedback, various aspects of the BEPS program. One such working group is their benchmarking and reporting working group, where they dive into issues such as third-party verification. The next working group meeting is actually coming up on December 2nd, right after the holidays. And that is a whole hour dedicated to discussing third-party verification with them. So we will follow up after this webinar with kind of a list of resources, but again, encourage folks to sign up for that if you have questions about sort of the why. Secondly, wanted to flag for any of those in the audience today who are with a Maryland state agency, local government, or nonprofit. Our friends over at the Maryland Department of General Services, DGS as we call them, they actually have a third-party verification task order. So they've pre-selected a vendor, and any of those 3 entities that I named can kind of jump on that task order. and bypass procurement. So if you are interested in kind of a quick fix in getting a vendor, I'm happy to put you in contact um, with the gentleman who runs that. That's Richard Lewis over at DGS. And then on here, I did just want to flag that if there are folks here from Montgomery County has its own very own BEPS program, and buildings located in Montgomery County are subject to sort of a different set of third-party verification requirements. So just linked to their third-party verification page. And then finally, it's sort of at the bottom of the screen. Sorry about that, but really the reason we're all here today, the last bullet is again what I call the crown jewel of resources, which is kind of a nice package of resources to help you make sense of third-party verification and hopefully solicit some bids from vendors. So again, we had been hearing from stakeholders that there was a lot of confusion on, the materials that they should bring when a third-party verifier comes to their building or sets up a meeting, et cetera. So we called up the Building Innovation Hub and said, let's work on this together. So without further ado, I am going to pass it off to Mary to walk through all of this.
Okay, thank you, Becky. And thanks for that overview. So yeah, diving into our third-party verification resources. These are hosted on the Building Innovation Hub's website. But yeah, we're really excited to share these new resources that we just launched in collaboration with the Maryland Clean Buildings Hub. They're designed to help navigate third-party verification ahead of the deadline next year. And it's a suite of resources. They include FAQs, my favorite piece of it, the downloadable RFP or request for proposal, which includes a detailed scope of work that you can use to hire a third-party verifier. And then we also have a separate page with additional tips to help navigate the process. And these were adapted from our DC resource for third-party verification, which was created with DOEE and Stephen Winter Associates. And it was one of the Hub's most popular resource, the Building Innovation Hub's most popular resource in 2024 ahead of the DC deadline for third-party verification. So, it's tried and true. We did make some adjustments, incorporating additional feedback, and hopefully it's even more of a streamlined process for folks in Maryland. So I'll walk you through the details and then we'll do a quick screen share. And one thing, just noting, we are both, as Becky noted, we're both hubs. And so I may just refer to the hub, and I mean the Building Innovation Hub here, just to streamline the process here. So back to the resource. Our FAQs cover some of the same information that Becky just presented. And I'll go through in more detail the FAQs on how does this work? How does third-party verification work? And also how do I get started, which really tie into the RFP and scope of work that we'll walk through next. And then, of course, as for the when should I get started FAQ, well, you're here, you're at this webinar, and that's a start. So we really recommend looking into hiring a verifier and collecting documentation now to avoid the crunch ahead of the June 1st deadline next year. These FAQs, they live on our website in a drop-down format. And so I'll show you how to access those later on. And it's a resource to go back to again and again and again. And before we get into the RFP template itself, I really wanted to zoom in on the how third-party verification works FAQ as really a context for this whole process. So once the verifier is hired, building owners will provide documentation to their verifier and access to the property in Energy Star Portfolio Manager, which Becky mentioned earlier. The verifier will review the documentation and the data provided, and they'll compare it to what's in the Portfolio Manager entry. So, that's just a point to say that the owner needs to set up the information in Portfolio Manager first. They're not relying on the verifier to do that. After the verifier reviews the data, compares it to the entry, the verifier will provide a list of corrections or adjustments to the owner. And then once those corrections are made, the verifier will check Portfolio Manager again for accuracy. And once they've confirmed that data is accurate, the verifier will then generate, review, and sign the Energy Star data verification checklist as required by MDE, which is a preset checklist that populates in Energy Star Portfolio Manager. So finally, once they've done that, they'll complete the overall process by marking the property as verified in Portfolio Manager and adding their information in the requisite spot, which it really includes their name and their professional designation, that criteria that Becky was talking about earlier, to the entry. And that will essentially complete the process and consider the data verified. And all of that needs to happen before June 1st of next year. So the process we just described is outlined in the sample request for proposal that you can download from our website. It's a Word doc, and it's something you can tailor for your property. And the RFP includes a proposed scope of work, which really outlines the responsibilities of the verifier and the activities they will conduct that we just talked about. And it also outlines owner responsibilities, including the documentation that will need to be provided and details on managing the Portfolio Manager account in the context of the verification process. So this document also includes instructions on how to respond to the RFP and some additional information, which we added to this Maryland version to help streamline the process for hiring a verifier. For many buildings, the basic RFP and scope of work that's included is all that might be necessary to conduct this work. But there may be some cases where additional steps are necessary to complete the verification. And so for that, we created an additional separate document we're calling the addendum to the scope of work, which has optional tasks to provide more support, which we'll go through in detail on our next slide. So our verification tips page is, it really provides additional support on navigating this process. And it includes a deep dive into the appropriate documentation that the owner will need to provide to the verifier. And that includes like building drawings and possible alternatives if you don't have actual drawings, as well as property use details and associated documentation and energy consumption information. And then on the same verification tips page, there is a section on how to help owners assess when to execute those optional tasks that we just talked about, which you can find in our separate sample scope of work addendum. And that includes documentation support. If you have contradictory or missing information, you might need some additional support from your verifier to complete that work, or when it might be helpful to have your verifier visit the site. In order to conduct verification, on-site visits are not necessary, but if you need to confirm where meters, your meter count and or if you need to get some measurements, it might be helpful to have your verifier visit the site. Finally, our additional tips page outlines a few do's and don'ts to just help streamline the process. So now that we've walked through our FAQs and the downloadable RFP and additional tips, you might be wondering, how do I actually find a verifier? It's not something that people can really easily Google. So we have another tool to help with that. It's our Find a Vendor portal, which primarily functions in two ways. And one is a searchable database where vendors in our system have profiles that you can search. But the other is a matching service, and that really kind of distinguishes us from other contractor databases out there, where you'll fill out an owner submission form, and we will make the initial connections between the owner and the vendor, and then they take it from there. So ahead of the DC deadline, we really had a surge in requests to make those connections, and many for a portfolio of buildings through this tool. So we are fully prepared and hoping that people will use it for Maryland as well. And it's also available for other building performance projects. And finally, I just wanted to highlight a few benchmarking best practices. And a lot of these really tie back to the additional tips resource, but they are really applicable each year and not just for third-party verification. And one I really want to highlight in particular alludes to what Becky was talking about earlier, which is that gross floor area in particular is just a really, it's a big thing. In DC, most of the data correction requests were that resulted from the third-party verification were related to updating the gross floor area, which Becky noted. And so just, make sure you talk to your third-party verifier about accurate gross floor area. So I am going to take a moment to flip over to our resource itself so that you can see. Okay. So this is some other things here. Okay, so this is what the resource itself looks like. It's a page on our website, and as we've talked about, it has the FAQs. This is a drop-down format where you can get the answers to these questions. And we even include links to the Maryland Benchmarking Guide, which Becky mentioned. So I'm trying to keep everything in one place. We've included the timeline that you all saw earlier, and then the RFP and downloadable scope of work are at the bottom of the page. You click on download the RFP and a Word document will download, and you can edit it from there. It will look something like this. And yellow highlighted areas are basic information that you'll want to update. But we strongly recommend you review this document and really tailor it so that it's specific to your property. The verification tips page, we have a little jump to section to help navigate things. And then you can go right from there to our tips page. This is really like location agnostic, so it also works for DC. And this is where you can find additional information on, building drawings, utility metering information, what's appropriate information to provide, as well as those optional tasks and when you might want to use those. And then finally, we have a do's and don'ts table to just help think through what's important here. I also want to take you to our Find a Vendor portal and show you how to navigate that. It includes the vendor library, like I talked about. You can filter for certain criteria, and or you can use our matching service where filling out the owner submission form, you enter the property information, and we even include in our form a window about where you can note if you want to use the sample scope of work template for third-party verification. So I'll take us back to our slides, and then let me just move this page over. Okay, back to our slides. And just as a reminder, the dates on the working group that Becky mentioned is December 2nd. And then, of course, there's the deadline itself on June 1st of next year. Now we'll go with our Q&A. Becky, want to come back?
Awesome. Thank you. That was great. Just a reminder, folks can keep throwing those Q&As in the Q&A box. And I'll just start emceeing it. So I actually just wanted to start with a logistical question that came through. Will these slides be made available after the presentation? I know we're recording it and are going to post it to our YouTube channels. Mary, did you have a preference on that?
Yeah, we can share the slides after the presentation.
Okay, awesome. That was an easy one. I just wanted to get through. Okay. Okay. I thought I read somewhere that a lead AP O&M, which stands for operations and maintenance, is also qualified. So no, those four certs that I listed on my slides are the only ones that MDE has specified. You are likely thinking about the list that Montgomery County, the list of certifications that Montgomery County has for their third-party verification requirement. Their list is like triple the size of the state's. That could be a question. You could ask MDE, for example, at the benchmarking and reporting working group on December 2nd. Awesome. Okay. Sort of a similar question. We are to submit third-party verification every 3 years. Is that requirement still in place, or did they change to 5 years as well? So I believe this question is likely coming from someone whose buildings are located in Montgomery County. Montgomery County SPEPS program requires third-party verification every 3 years. The state's is different. We require it every 5 years. So yeah.
And I want to add to that because if this question was also about DC. DC
Oh, gotcha.
used to be 3 years, but they actually switched it to every 6 years in order to align with the BEP cycle.
Gotcha. Okay. Cool, cool, cool. What will the DGS vendor charge for third-party verification for nonprofits? I don't know what that would charge, but I was wondering, Mary, with your work with DC, if you kind of had like a ballpark range of how much this costs. But I guess to just I don't believe that nonprofits are going to get a special rate or anything. Yeah, Mary, do you have any kind of
Yeah, I
context
mean,
on
we definitely get that
range?
question. And of course, the first answer is it depends. It depends on a lot of things on how many buildings, how big are your buildings, how complex are your buildings, and also how good is your data, like how much information do you have available. And so it's also I know this is recorded and I don't want to don't want to make anyone upset if prices come in at a different point, but we have generally seen and heard that prices at the lower end come in the maybe the $700 range, but they could go up to maybe like $3,000. I've seen a $30,000 quote for a campus, so it which I think included a lot more, but it depends is really what it comes down to.
Cool. Here's another one for you, Mary. My firm is listed on the Find a Vendor page, but is not listed as a third-party verifier. We would like to update our entry to include that. Should we submit a new application, or is there another way to reach out and have it updated?
You can email me, mary.thomas@imt.org. And it may be that, we have our vendor program has been in place for a couple of years. And so there have been some updates to the form. So if someone was entered their data in early, that may not have been a criteria that you could have selected so welcoming changes. We can always make changes. Start off by just emailing me at mary.thomas@imt.org.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, sifting through the questions. Does Maryland require water use to be benchmarked like DC does? No, we do not. Like an easy question. Here's another one I think I'm going to throw to you, Mary. Our facility has utility energy usage data updated and synced to Portfolio Manager. How will the third-party verifier look at this?
So the third-party verifier will look at your Portfolio Manager account. But I guess the point is that, how are they comparing that to what the utility has provided? That is a good question. I think, as part that this is like this is generally a new requirement. So, uh, I think what you really want to provide to the portfolio manager or to the third party verifier, and you'll want to have these own records anyways, and not just rely on what the automatic update might be from your utility, but you really want to have your own records of your meters, your meter numbers, how many meters you have, what they're for, who your utilities are. And that's the kind of information that you can provide to your third party verifier. And so, for example, they'll check, if the list that you gave them has, 5 meters, but there's only 2 meters in your portfolio manager account, then that's a flag there. And I definitely want to encourage you to go to our additional tips page, which has a deep dive in utility metering information and how to review that as well.
Awesome. Um, okay. For the fourth category of a qualified third-party verifier, the building energy assessment professional, are there specific certifications required? Or simply, if a service provider performs building energy assessments, are they a qualified third-party verifier? No, so that is actually an ASHRAE certification or credential. I can in a second put the link to that credential in the chat. Okay. Um, Sorry, there are a lot of duplicative questions, so I'm trying to wade through these. I wish I had some elevator music. Um, Someone says you only have 4 credentials that can do third-party verification. Did building owners not ask for more options? Again, this would be a great question to bring to MDE at the Benchmarking and Reporting Working Group on December 2nd.
And I'll also note that these are the same credentials that were required in the DC verification. So, there's some overlap there.
Okay. Another question, does the engineer have to be licensed in Maryland or will other states still be able to be used? Um, Based on my interpretation of the regulation, they just have to be licensed in the United States. But Mary, I'm just curious if DC has any idiosyncrasies you'd like to share.
It was the same. And actually, that's an important point to make from a capacity standpoint because there are thousands of buildings that need to be verified, and there are only so many local companies that can perform the service. I mean, there are a lot, don't get me wrong, but we definitely saw that companies were really busy ahead of the third-party verification deadline in DC, to the point that some of the vendors in our database told us to stop sending them, asked us to stop sending them opportunities because they were too busy. But you can get your data verified by anyone licensed in the United States. So the company doesn't have to be local. They could be in California or Chicago or New Jersey. But to that point, you really want to make sure they understand the nuances of the regulation and what's required of them. Especially, I mean, you want that for a local company as well, but if they are out of state, just make sure you ask that extra level of scrutiny to make sure they understand the requirements. Because especially in, different jurisdictions have different verification requirements, so they need to know what's specific to Maryland.
Awesome. Okay, moving along. Are there utility incentives that could cover verification wrapped into building tune-up services? From my research, no. But I'm curious, Mary, if you've encountered that in DC.
No, no, we have not.
Okay. Okay. Kind of more of a comment, but I wonder if Mary, if maybe we want to share your screen again. lots of DC stuff on the Building Innovation Hub pages, how to separate out the MD, the Maryland stuff.
That's a
Um,
great question. We are in the process, and we were hoping to have it done today, but it's not. But we are, and I will share my screen again. Let's see. I guess I can start with this, and then I'll go back. So as I noted, when we first launched, we were really focused on DC, which is why you see a lot of DC related things. We had a grant from the Department of Energy and Environment. And so a lot of our resources really are focused on DC, but we're in starting with this regulation basics page, which right now you see DC building energy performance standards, benchmarking. This is all really specific to DC. And this is a page that we are, I want to say within, certainly by the end of the month, we are going to update this so we have a Maryland section, and you'll be able to navigate to this new resource from this Maryland section. We're actually going to revamp it a little bit so it's not so just like word heavy, but and you'll be able to navigate to our resource, and we'll also have links to the Maryland Clean Buildings Hub page, as well as MDE's website, and Montgomery County, since there's a lot of overlap there. So we're trying to sort of clean things up as we go. But it's definitely, if anyone has any questions, really, you can't. I dropped my email address in the chat, and then we also have somewhere a contact us page. Oh, here we go. There's a little button for questions or feedback that you can jump right to, and that goes right to the Hub's inbox. So, feel free to reach out if you have any questions or feedback on how to navigate this.
and yeah, Mary, could you keep your screen up because we had a question. Are you going to have a vendor list and how do vendors get on it? So I just wanted to say that again, I work for the Maryland Energy Administration, which is a government agency. Therefore, I do have some limitations, and am unable to endorse vendors. However, this is where it's really great to partner with nonprofit partners, such as the Building Innovation Hub, because they can create vendor tools like this. So I just wanted, yeah, Mary, to show folks the Find a Vendor page again.
Yeah. Yeah, so and I kind of was doing this slowly, but I'll go, from our home screen or from anywhere actually on our website, you can always hover over resources and find a vendor link. This takes you to our Find a Vendor page. We also have a service procurement guide that I might as well highlight, because that really helps
Awesome.
folks understand how to navigate the process. But from the Find a Vendor page, the owner submission form that we looked at is here. If you're a vendor, you're a third-party verifier, you're any kind of building performance contractor, consultant, you can fill out our vendor application. And sorry, my screen's in dark mode, so it's kind of hard to read the text. But if yours is not in dark mode, you can see the text better. And that is the first step. After we review your information, we can add you to the vendor library. And this is where, for instance, your, professional certifications, like we were just talking about a building energy professional, that's a criteria for verification, or a CEM, that's another criteria for certification. You can filter for different sorts of things to be part of, or for what you're looking for.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
And that reminds me, I will also link the Find a Vendor portal in the third-party verification section of my Hub's website. So that's a good reminder. Can you provide examples of supporting documentation for building occupancy and space use characteristics? Are site visits needed to verify these?
So let me go back to our resource. I'm clicking a lot. I did not do myself. Okay.
And let me know if you need me to
Yeah.
reread that question. It was kind of a long one, and it was two parts.
Yeah, so it's about space use characteristics. And I'm going back. Actually, I'll share my screen again. So our additional tips has some information on what to provide as far as space use characteristics. And this doesn't really cover like specific documentation, but I mean, the kind of information you could provide is usually based on your building drawings. So there's more information on that, including alternatives to drawings. And then, this outlines sort of how you want to define your space use characteristics. And it could be, I mean, I think the kind of information there isn't like a specific requirement for what type of documentation it might be, but it could be like a spreadsheet with, the floor area that's associated with different use types. A site visit would not necessarily be required, but it can be helpful, especially if you're trying to better understand occupancy. So there's some flexibility into how that documentation is presented.
Awesome. Okay. Can I assume in 2026 that the third party will verify only 1 year of energy data, and then in 2031 they verify all 5 previous years? Should we assume there will be a cost difference between 2026 and 2031? I'm wondering, Mary, if you have any insight.
I mean, my understanding and assumption is that it's just 1 year of energy data. That in 2031, you're reviewing 2030 energy data. You're not reviewing all 5 years.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
And I guess just to
Learning
take that,
experience for us all.
yeah, I mean, I think to take that one step further, and because it's every 5 years, so your building should be improving every 5 years, right? So, that 1 year of energy data should tell you where you are at that time, and hopefully it's improved over the last 5 years.
Awesome. Please confirm that the third-party verification must be completed by June 1st, 2026. Yes, I'm confirming that. It's an easy one. This is where I need my elevator music.
And next time we'll have to have background music.
If building square footage and occupancy are the most common errors, what are the requirements for a verifier? Do they need to review record drawings, conduct a site visit, etc.? Are there specific rules, or is it just in the best professional judgment of a verifier?
So, I'm trying to see that question in writing. I mean, I think the best guidance really in terms of what rules there are around what needs to be reviewed really goes back to MDE and the technical guidance manual, which does outline what third-party verifiers need to review. And that I will share my screen one more time. And that includes, your basic property information, the review of property use details, including your accurate gross floor area and allocation to appropriate property types, your building occupancy, as well as the review of your energy consumption, And so that's, steps here, 1, 2, and 3, that's what needs to be reviewed. And then of course, the signature and information of the verifiers is what is required to complete the process. And this is a, document that you can get to from MDE's website. And we'll link to MDE's website and you can get to it from there. And it's just sort of it's a more detailed version of the MDE benchmarking guide that Becky was talking about earlier. So I hope I have answered that question fully. We can revisit it if not.
Awesome. The light turned off again, so I had to jump up and down. Looks a bit silly. Here's an interesting one. For campus compliance, should we anticipate the cost of third-party verification will scale up with the number of buildings?
I do think that is, that's likely, like we said earlier, it depends. Uh, so, there's more to review there. But I couldn't really speak to kind of what that scale might be.
Okay. That is something we can address later, maybe. Okay. I'm going to read out a question that is a great question for folks to bring to MDE's benchmarking reporting working group. I know I sound like a little bit of a broken record, but hi, Adam, old buddy, old friend. Do you know how MDE will evaluate and approve changes to gross floor area? So yeah, that's a great question you can bring on December 2nd after the Thanksgiving holiday. Okay, 3 more minutes. We still have like a ton of open questions. There are some duplicates, but I am just letting folks know we unfortunately will not be able to get to all of them. So, of course, always welcome to email myself or Mary. You can take your pick. Um, okay. Here's one I just want to quickly address. How are we submitting the benchmarking report in Energy Star? Yes, benchmarking is done in Energy Star Portfolio Manager.
Yeah, and just one nuance I want to make there too is that the third-party verification isn't like a separate data submission. What it is it's a check of you have to submit your benchmarking report annually in Energy Star Portfolio Manager. And so what third-party verification does is just check that that's accurate. And so there's this extra step of the verifier filling out the data verification checklist and then entering, marking the property as verified. So just want to make sure there's that nuance that it's not a separate activity, a separate report, really. And I think I saw a question here about a BPS report submission, and it's all the same thing. I mean, it all the reporting is done in Energy Star Portfolio Manager. There isn't a separate BPS submission.
Okay. Just 2 more minutes. It's like all these questions are overwhelming in a good way. Can you please send the link to sign up for the December 2nd benchmarking session? Yes, absolutely. We're going to be sending out a follow-up email, I think tomorrow latest, and any of the things that we have touched upon today, resources, etc., will be included in that email. Okay. Another question. Can vendors help with benchmarking and third-party verification? Yes. For Maryland state BEPS, yes. I know for DC, the vendor you choose to help you with benchmarking cannot be the same as the vendor that does third-party verification, but we're more flexible in Maryland. Okay, one more minute. I don't know, Mary, is there any question in here that you're would like to ask in the last minute?
Um, well, there's a question about let's see here. Someone asked what are the square foot requirements? And
Okay.
that's a good one because your gross floor area, it's a measure of the building area inside of the building envelope, essentially. But for Maryland, it does not include your parking. But it does include all your habitable spaces. So a lot of times the penthouse is missed, but that's a habitable space. And even your elevator lobbies. So your parking is excluded, but your like elevator lobby in your garage would be included. So there just are some nuances to what's included in the gross floor area. And the source of truth for that is the Energy Star portfolio manager has a glossary of definitions. So make sure to review that in order uh, to assess the accurate gross floor area. I
Awesome.
think it's time to wrap up.
It is 2:01. Thanks, folks, so much. And really appreciate your engagement. Again, there were many questions we unfortunately weren't able to get to today, but encourage you to email myself or Mary, and we will get you those answers. That is what we do day in and day out is we want to help you guys. So, Mary, do you have any parting remarks?
Yeah, just we're here to help and excited about this collaboration with Becky and the Maryland Clean Buildings Hub. So hopefully this was helpful and be on the lookout for our follow-up email with the slide, the recording, and some additional information.
Awesome. Okay, take care, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.